This is Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate, the podcast where we cover home buying, home selling, home improvement tips and ideas, market trends and developments, and investing in real estate. If you own real estate in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, or want to own real estate here, then you're in the right place. Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate is hosted by Blake Watson, a real estate agent and investor in Tennessee and Georgia.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate. I'm Blake Watson with Epic Realty, and I was recently a guest on a podcast called the Silver Divorce Podcast. It's hosted by Lisa McClusky, and we talked about issues around how to handle the marital home in divorce. Does one of you keep the house? How does that work? Do you sell the house? How does that work? We talk about many of the decisions that have to be made and pitfalls to avoid when dealing with the marital home after divorce. So today, I'm going to let you listen to our conversation, and hopefully, if you or a friend are going through a divorce at any age, it will be helpful to you. Here is our conversation on the Silver Divorce Podcast.
This is the Silver Divorce Podcast, broadcast from the Whitfield Media Group studios in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Please follow this show and share it with people you know who are facing divorce. We are proudly brought to you by our title sponsor, the Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. And I'm your host, Lisa McClusky, and now let's podcast. Welcome, Blake.
Well, thank you, Lisa. It's good to be here with you.
It's good to have you here, a fellow Chattanoogan.
Yeah, that's right. Right here, local.
That's right.
I know you have a lot of guests from around the country, and maybe around the world. I don't know, but certainly around the country.
Yeah, absolutely around the world.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Even with that, a lot of the principles of what to do with your house when you get divorced are pretty much the same wherever you are.
True.
And so I think this is going to be great information for people. In gray divorce, the house is usually the largest asset that they have. They typically have accumulated a lot of equity over the years, and it's a very challenging decision. A lot of times it's very emotional. People have raised their kids in that house, and so many wonderful family memories have happened in that house. So when they're making a decision, it's not always based on what's the best thing from a financial standpoint. Sometimes it's based on, I don't want to let go of the place where perhaps we had our daughter's backyard wedding, or, our kids, their growth chart is notched on the side of the door.
Yeah.
So those are the things that we want to parse out is, what are your options? What are some things you should be thinking about? And just really dive into all of the possibilities with that asset.
Absolutely. It is it's important decisions that someone has to make after divorce in so many things. But yes, the home is generally the largest asset that you're needing to work through and determine how it's going to be either divided or sold to divide the proceeds, or are you going to keep it? Or is one party going to keep it? Is one of the two spouses going to keep it? So I know there's a lot of different options that people can look at with that. And of course, most of my experience as a realtor is working with someone who is already divorced, usually. Sometimes in process, I'm talking with them, but usually they're already divorced, and they've decided they're going to sell their house. But there are other options, so we can certainly talk through those before we get to what you need to consider for selling.
Sure, but before we do that, I want to let people know a little bit more about you, because you have such a vast background in all things real estate. You're not just a realtor who's come forward selling residential property, but you have a rich history. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, sure. Lisa, my background actually in business is in advertising. I have been a marketer and advertising primarily in radio and television over many years, over decades of my career. But at the same time, I also started investing with my wife and also with other partners in real estate, in not only single family homes, that's the primary thing we've done, but we also had some commercial property. We've had an office building, a warehouse, now that I'm thinking about that. And I think I mentioned to you that we even had some self-storage units for a while. So, and then we own a farm. We have a farm. So, land and farming activity, that's some stuff that we've been involved in. So yes, I've been involved in selling real estate and renting real estate and buying real estate for many years. And just a few years ago, really kind of came to the decision that why don't I just be a full-time realtor? Because so many people were asking me about investing and how they might go about buying a house and renting it out and how would that best be done. And so I said, I actually sat down to write a book. I sat down to write a book about investing, which is still unfinished, but I'm going to work on it and finish it up. But at that time, it just kind of struck me that I needed to just be a realtor. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay, so you have all aspects of real estate covered. I just wanted to let our audience know that because there probably isn't any question that Blake can't answer.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but I can at least get the right direction going.
And as an aside, your farm is, tell us what your farm is.
So the farm, we actually have two farms. We've got a farm with cattle on it, but the main, the farm that I talk to a lot of people about is the Dancing Goat Farm. We actually have these small miniature Nigerian dwarf goats that my daughter and I actually started this farm in 2018, and it's where we live. So this farm is just not a lot of acreage, but some acres where we live, and we have the goats and we raise them, and we breed. So we have baby goats born, and here in the springtime, which it is now, we have babies all around us, baby goats all around us. So it's
that sounds like a lot of fun.
It is. People love it. And, I'm just thinking about even the therapeutic effect. And this might be significant for this podcast. The therapy that's available through just being around goats is amazing to me. I mean, even for us and for my family, if we're having a bad day, or even if we're not having a bad day, we just need just a bright spot in the day. We go out in the field and go visit with the goats, and they have not only a calming effect, but just they bring a smile to your face.
Oh,
they really
that's
do.
Great. Yeah.
So.
I would imagine that you might need that in a high pressure job of real estate, right?
That's right.
Okay, so let's dive in and give our audience a roadmap to making that very important decision. What do we do with the house? So when the divorce bomb has gone off, couples, they will turn to that highly valued asset, the house. And when they do, and before they start making some emotional decisions, what are the first steps that they should take?
Well, my thought is that they should consider professional assistance during this time, because it's such an emotional time. And I'm not just talking about a realtor. I'm talking about certainly an attorney. I think probably attorney's the first thing they do, right? But your CPA, I mean, this is a very big financial decision and how you're going to handle it. Your CPA, realtor, an appraiser, these are all people that are professionals that are not connected to the two of you in a divorce, right? And so you've got a third party who has, a better look at what's going on perhaps than you would through your emotions. So, and I have seen so many divorces and I'm talking about from a real estate perspective, and many times through rentals that I've had, where the the two parties are just not, they don't think clearly. And I haven't been through a divorce, but I can see it in others when that's happening, and they're not thinking clearly, and they need somebody on the outside to just kind of say, hey, hang on a second. Is this really what you want to do? Or is there maybe a way that's going to help you down the road better and help both of you down the road better? Generally, those third-party professionals, the realtor, the CPA, the attorney, attorneys are hired, I know, to kind of be oppose,
right.
So, and represent your separate interests. But a realtor and appraiser, CPA, they're really looking out for both of your interests in most cases. Mm-hmm. Certainly the realtor should, because the property belongs to both of you.
Right.
And you want someone that sees both parties as their client, even though there are two involved.
Yeah, and I think it's very important. You mentioned getting a certified appraiser. Oftentimes, the couple won't agree on the value of the house, and they're making their opinion on the value based on what, Joe and Sally sold their house for a few months ago. Or let's talk about Zillow.
Absolutely.
People will look on Zillow, and they'll think that that is the value of their house. And I know in my case, the value that was listed on Zillow was off by $200,000 based on the appraised value. So,
yeah, and that's actually, and Zillow, yes, that is a computer-generated valuation of your home. They call it their Zestimate. And sometimes it often is a good ballpark to start with, at least. And it gives you a sense of what your value may be. But because it is computer generated, and especially if a property is unique or has nothing is sold in a while around, maybe it's in a neighborhood that's more established, or maybe it's not in a neighborhood at all. My home where I live, I have acreage, I have a farm. There's nothing exactly like that or even real close to it around. It would be very hard for Zillow to have a proper estimate of my home value. And so it is important to have that licensed appraiser. And a realtor is not a licensed appraiser. That's a whole nother profession.
That's a market value. Could you explain the difference between licensed appraised value or appraised value by a licensed appraiser and a real estate market value? A lot of people are confused on that.
Yeah, so a realtor has, we do a competitive market analysis where we're going to look at other recent sales of like properties around your property and do the best we can to help you come up with a sales price. That's really what a realtor focuses on, is what would be a selling price of the property. And it's not an appraisal. And in real estate school, they make it very clear. You're not doing an appraisal. You are doing a competitive market analysis or comparative market analysis. And what an appraiser does, they are licensed separately. It's a total different licensing, and they have a much more robust amount of data that they utilize and much more intricate details that they are really looking at to come up with your appraised value. Even the appraisers, I mean, if you had two different appraisers, they're going to come up with different values for your home. It's not like there is a automatic, here's the number, this is absolutely the number, and that's, you can take that to the bank. Well, you can usually take it to the bank if a licensed appraiser has done it, but it's not necessarily the case. I mean, the appraiser may not know if you have issues like, a roof leak or termites or something like that going on.
Right, but they do look at some structural things as well, too, the licensed appraiser.
They can. They're going to, if something is evident, then they're going to, and a realtor should do that too. We all, as professionals, if something is evident and a normal, I shouldn't say a normal professional, but a normal person should recognize them, like a sunken in part or something like that, then yes, that is part of the scope of work that we would do. However, no, an appraiser doesn't necessarily look at structural they don't look at it any more closely than the next guy. That is actually a different thing. That would be a home inspector. A home inspector, which is also in some states licensed. Here locally, we're in Chattanooga. Tennessee does have a licensing program, but nearby states do not. Mm-hmm. So if a home inspector can certainly be certified, but and that's a national certification, but if they are licensed, they also are going to have some hoops they need to jump through to make sure that they are qualified to do the work. A home inspector would find things like structural issues, broken systems, ductwork problems, anything like that.
Mm-hmm. So a good, fair starting point would be that licensed, appraised value.
Absolutely. And that's what a court would look at as well. They're not going to, the two of you may agree with a realtor or even on a price that the two of you agree on. But a court's going to look at the appraisal from a licensed appraiser as really as a number that we can work with.
Right. And I know the other advantage that I have mentioned before is that if you go ahead and have that appraisal done, if it comes down to you're keeping the house and perhaps you need to refinance, well, your bank will accept that appraisal.
Right.
And even if you're selling, then you already have the appraisal in hand and your buyer can submit that appraisal to their mortgage lender as well, because as long as it's within a certain time frame, I think I understood.
Well, their mortgage lender will also, they'll order a separate appraisal.
Okay.
They will, but it certainly gives them a good number to work off of.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's one that generally when you're getting a loan, somebody else's appraisal is not going to, even if it's one you just bought or paid for, is not going to be the one that they are prepared to loan on. Part of that is because a lender, a mortgage company, is going to, when they get an appraisal, when they order the appraisal, it goes to kind of a clearinghouse that kind of bids different appraisers, and it disconnects that mortgage company from the actual appraiser.
Okay.
So it basically prevents you from influencing the appraiser or the lender from influencing the appraiser. That's different than it used to be back many years ago, when probably many folks who would be in a silver situation, may have bought their property.
Right.
Back then you went out and picked your appraiser, or the banker would ask you.
I remember doing that years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And maybe the lender says, who do you want to do the appraisal?
Exactly.
No more.
Okay.
That never happens
That's
now.
a change.
Yeah, that's a change. Now the appraiser is not even selected by the lender. They have to really be arm's length away from that.
Okay.
And that's just part of the regulatory environment, which is good to some degree.
Good to know.
Yeah, it's good to know for sure.
Yeah. So let me ask this then. If you know your appraiser is coming, should you be there at the time?
That's a great question. It's either way is okay if your house is pretty self-evident about its condition and everything. I think it's good to be there personally, because the appraiser may have a question that they can ask you on the spot. You're not going to walk around, following your appraiser throughout the house. They've got to take photographs and measurements and things like that. It would be inappropriate, uncool to be following them around,
I have to admit, Blake, when our appraiser went through, I was with him.
And you walked through?
I walked through with him, and he asked me a number of questions.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. They would.
About certain, especially in the basement area, there was a finished room. He had several questions that he asked me. So in the end, I was glad I was there. But I wondered, a lot of people think, I should not be there. Nobody should be there. But
I don't think that's the case at all.
Yeah.
I do think it's helpful, because some questions might come up and they can be easily answered there.
Right.
And he or she may not think to call you or ask those questions later. But if it's a simple, quick answer, then you can give it to them right away.
And it helps facilitate getting the appraisal back to you quickly. They're not going
Agreed.
back and forth with questions.
Agreed. So yes, that's good advice.
So try and be there if you can.
Yeah, that's a good plan. Good to be there. Good to be on hand. You can be going about your own business, doing whatever you want, or at least like you did, you can follow
followed
him
him around.
I love that.
Yeah, I did.
I mean, I'm sure that you are a kind person, and you're not going to be arguing with him about
Well, I have to
things,
tell you, then I also asked him questions about the market.
Okay.
Because I figured,
Yeah.
hey, he's been in and out of quite a few houses, and
Yeah.
I was asking him some questions about the market and what are some trends that he was seeing. And so it was more too for if the house was going to be for sale, I wanted to know, what are some trends that he was
Right,
seeing.
right.
And
That's good.
it ended up being a really good conversation.
Yeah,
So
that's really good. I hadn't thought about the intel that you were getting back
Right.
from him.
Yeah.
Let alone getting an appraisal, but also the intel about
Exactly.
what's going on out there in the market. Yeah, good for you.
That's getting the most for your money.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's good.
So let's talk about what are the options in a divorce.
Sure. There, of course, you can keep the house, and how does that work? And I say keep the house, that there's a lot of ways that the house can be kept, right?
Right.
One spouse can keep the house, and if that happens, there are a lot of variables that have to be considered there, and that's not uncommon. We both know that.
Right.
I think you kept your house.
I did. I kept my house.
And you had some surprises later that you weren't really expecting.
That's right. Everything will go wrong once you decide to keep your house. And
and that's and I'll share with you a story in a minute about something along those lines. But if you keep your house, you certainly are still, in most cases, going to need to divide the value of the property, right?
Right.
So that each spouse gets a fair and equitable amount of that. So usually one of you is going to need to buy out the other. That's the most common thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be that, and that's where you need an appraisal.
that's right.
Almost
That's where
certainly that's what you're going to need.
Yeah, absolutely. That gives you that concrete number. They take that appraised value and they deduct what you still owe on the mortgage, and that becomes your equity. So then they look at dividing that equity.
That's right.
And that's where you want that concrete number of the market value or the appraised value.
Yeah. So in simple math,
Mm-hmm.
it could be that your home appraises for $500,000, and you owe, your mortgage is still for $250,000. So the equity is the other $250,000, right?
Right.
And you're right. You have to somehow divide that equity. And then you also have the mortgage itself. You kind of you're going to need to deal with that too. But that equity of $250,000, is one of you in a position to, and I guess during the division of assets, you're going to figure out, can you pay the other one $125,000 for their portion of the equity, and then also manage the loan, the mortgage loan. So there's a lot there, and I don't want to be, as I mentioned, most of the time as a realtor, I come in after the divorce is complete and they've already decided they're going to sell. But I know those mechanics of things that have to be handled prior to that, and yes, you've got to deal with the debt, and you've also got to deal with the amount of equity. So yes, the equity amount is the difference between that new appraised value and what you owe. And one of you may need to try to buy out the other if you're going to keep the house.
And that can be, oftentimes the buyout can be partial cash, giving up your right to perhaps a 401k, because if there is a 401k distribution and you would be entitled to half of that 401k, you may say, well, I'm going to give up my half to make up for that, what I would owe on the equity. So there's a number of ways to come up with that number. And then also there are other assets that you can consider. There are, perhaps there are boats, or there are vehicles, or there are collections of some kind. Those types of assets, they can consider letting your spouse keep that asset, and you are credited with the value of that asset toward the equity in the house.
Yes.
So I've seen many arrangements where you can get very creative. You don't have to be stuck on, I've got to give them cash. There's many ways to come up. You just think of it as, it's a number. How are we going to get to that number, and what all can go into that, getting to that number?
That's a great way to look at it. You're exactly right. It shouldn't scare us that it's got to be cash.
Right.
Because it doesn't have to be cash.
No.
I'm just thinking in my own home that we have 2 drivers and we have 4 cars.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
So obviously there's some value to
the cars.
Aside from the 2 that we normally would drive and consider our car.
And there are collections. I talk about that a lot because people don't even think about that. Does a spouse have a huge gun collection? Well, there's a lot of value in a gun collection or a coin collection.
Mm-hmm.
Those collections, when you're doing this is kind of a different topic, but when you're doing your property inventory, people overlook those collections. Well, don't. Make sure they're included. Make sure that you're getting a value on those collections. And then if that spouse wants to keep the gun collection, you're credited with what would be your half of the value. You can use that towards your house equity, what you would owe for your house equity. So I encourage people to be really creative and make sure you're taking time to do that property inventory completely. When people receive that, they look at it like a pain in the rear end, and they'll say, oh, I have furniture and, some artwork, and that's it. No, go line by line. Look at everything you have, because there's value there that you may need if you're wanting to keep your house.
That's good to know. Yeah, and I was just thinking, Lisa, I don't know in your experience if you've run into this, is cash value of life insurance policies, is that, I'm guessing life insurance is kind of off the table, but I don't know that.
I would put it in your listing of assets because it may not be off the table. If there's a cash value in that, well, who gets to keep that cash value? And I don't know enough about how life insurance works. That's where you mentioned a team.
Yes, absolutely.
Get in touch with your insurance agent and have that conversation with the cash value. Who does that accrue to? And, could that be part of what's considered marital assets?
Yeah.
So it's just points to the fact that you need to think about everything around you, all of your agreements, and which of those can be considered marital assets, and put them on your property listing. Just don't leave any stone unturned. It is well worth it in the end when you're trying to parse out how you're going to pay that equity when you want to keep the house.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about the mortgage as well and having to determine how to pay that off. And I did want to bring up a story of a client that I had who signed a quitclaim deed. And for your listeners, a quitclaim is literally where if you own property, real estate, a home in this case, but you own real estate, and you can go to the title company and go to an attorney's office and sign a paper that is called a quitclaim, and it means that you no longer will claim ownership of that property, and you're just going to hand it over to someone else. And there are many cases when that's appropriate and the right thing to do, but it's dangerous if you just do it willy-nilly in a divorce. And that's exactly what happened to one of my clients who was later buying a house, but she had signed a quitclaim deed and deeded her home to her husband during the divorce. So he now owned the house, but they didn't do anything to the mortgage.
Right.
And she's still on the mortgage.
They're still on the mortgage.
So she still owed the money on that house as though it was her property.
That's right.
And it wasn't her property anymore. And so that was it wasn't a problem ultimately, because the plan was he was going to continue living there and making the payments, which he did. So it didn't, but if anything had happened,
if he had decided to be a jerk,
he could have walked away.
He could have walked away, and she would have been on the hook for the mortgage.
That's right. And how it came up for us and where the problem arose in my interaction with her as my client was then it made it hard for her to qualify for her next home, which she was buying.
That's because her debt to income ratio was well skewed.
That's right.
Because she already had a mortgage on her credit report.
That's right. She had this other mortgage on her credit report, so it was going to make it hard for her to go and buy another house.
Yeah.
So yes, we've got to, make sure people think about that. And that was just a simple decision that she made, I would think, without good advice from an attorney or without good advice from someone outside of the marriage.
Right. Make sure you have the decision made as to if there's going to be a refinancing or if you're going to qualify to assume the mortgage. And I can share in my case, my bank has a program called the Qualified Assumptions, and you qualify to assume the mortgage at the current rate. So nothing changed, which was wonderful because we were in it was refinanced at a time of very, very low interest rates. Remember those, 3.0.
Oh, yeah.
And now, what are they, 7?
We're running right around 7 right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can assume the current mortgage, that's the best option. For my bank, I was able to submit a quit claim deed, which allowed them to start the processing of the mortgage to get to put it in my name before the divorce was actually final.
Okay.
So they used it to facilitate getting the paperwork done. So there are a lot of considerations on that quit claim deed. As you said, you want to make sure that person's not going to take advantage of you and leave you hanging on the mortgage. But if you're doing an assumption, it might help speed your assumption along if you can go ahead and start the process.
Absolutely.
So a lot of things to think about.
Yeah, and there's no need to fear a quit claim deed.
Right,
They're used all the
exactly.
time
Yeah.
for many very legitimate and proper reasons, just as you said.
Right.
But just always get good advice.
Buyer beware, right? Trust but verify.
Got an injury that just can't wait? There's no need to delay your care. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is excited to announce that our Urgent Ortho Walk-In Clinic is now available on Saturdays at the Gun Barrel Road location. Open from 8 to noon, we're here to treat sprains, strains, fractures, and more. No appointment needed. So skip the long ER wait and get specialized orthopedic care fast. Visit us this Saturday at Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics Urgent Ortho. We're the center for expert care right when you need it. Learn more at sportmed.com.
Another option you may have, of course, is to sell the house. And that, again, is probably where you're going to use a realtor, most likely. I mean, you can sell it for sale by owner, but some of the things that I have found are issues of agreeing on the sales price. Again, that is so good if you get the appraiser to come in. Even if you're selling the house, if you have an appraiser come before, well, then everybody, including the court, can look at that price and feel like, okay, this is the right starting point, at least. Now, it may not sell for that. It may sell for more than that. It may sell for less. But it's a proper starting point, right?
Right.
And if you're going to sell the house, then you need to be in agreement, certainly on the sale price. And then if you receive offers, you need to be flexible with working with different offers and perhaps repairs. There's a lot of things that go into selling the house if you're going to sell it.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. What have you seen in terms of if the house needs work to get the house ready to put it on the market? What are some of the ways you've seen people handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question because so often one party or maybe both just don't want to invest anything in the house. They're just ready to walk away and be done. And you can sell a house like that, but it's probably not going to sell for as much as it should. And so that, again, goes to having professionals help advise you. I have seen where most of the folks that I've worked with that are going through divorce are amicable enough that they have enough thought that they can do repairs, at least minor repairs, maybe not replacing the roof. But if they see that it needs to be repainted or there's some carpet that needs to be fixed, and a lot of times that won't come up until after the actual offers are coming in. And that's when, anyone that's buying a house is generally going to have a full inspection. And when they have their inspection, they're going to probably find some things they want repaired.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when they do, you're going to need to deal with that. Either you're going to want to pool your money together to make those repairs, or in many cases, what we just do is allow a credit toward the home purchase price, or a credit that if at closing, say in one case, I'm thinking of a divorce that I was working with, and the home needed a new roof. And we knew that before we listed it. But we let the buyers know that we're going to work through that with a credit.
Okay.
And the credit, the way it worked, we didn't say I don't remember what the sale price was, if it was $300,000. Well, instead of saying, okay, we're just going to knock $10,000 off, which would not have helped the buyer to do that, they still bought it at $300,000, but they, at closing, the sellers, which was the divorcing couple, had a check written at closing from the title company, a check written to the roofer for $10,000 or whatever it was.
Okay.
So, and it was literally written to the contractor. So that kept everything clean and appropriate. The bank was happy with that was lending money to this other new home buyer that was coming in. The bank was cool with that. They said, you're putting a new roof on, we're good. We just need to see that it's done.
Yeah, because they won't lend more than the appraised value.
Correct.
So it's not like you can tack on $10,000 for, a credit for a roof.
Yeah, you can't just tack it on.
They're not going to do that.
Yeah, in fact, you're exactly right. And the appraiser was aware that a new roof was being put on, and that was part of the appraisal.
Oh,
in fact, was, this appraisal is $300,000, and this is pending the new roof going on. And so the appraiser had to come back and look to see that the new roof was put on. Or actually, I think we just had to send him from the licensed roofing contractor, proof of production, basically.
See, there's another reason why you should be there when the appraiser is there, so that you could tell him.
That's right. Yeah, in my case, I was the realtor and was able to tell
you were
the
able
appraiser.
To tell him.
Yeah, because the realtors are going to know the appraiser's coming, because we got to let them in the house if the homeowner doesn't. But you're right. That is another reason you want to be there, to tell the appraiser especially something like that that's significant. Or, hey, this back porch, we're repairing all of this deck back here, or whatever it may be.
That's right.
We're doing this, and that may become part of his report. The appraiser may then, these things that you've said are going to be happening. I mean, if they're minor things, it probably is not going to make any difference. But a roof or major repairs to a back porch, those are significant enough that they're going to change the value, and he is going to need to confirm that those things happened.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, both people in the divorce need to get as much as they can from the sale of their house.
That's right.
If you decide, well, I'm not lifting a finger, or I'm not doing anything to get this house ready, you are risking getting less than what you should. So
you're really shooting yourself in the foot,
right?
Sadly, and that is also what I've seen many times. Despite what professionals outside, third parties are encouraging someone to do in a divorce situation, in a divorce sale, they still, because maybe one party is just wanting to walk away, and maybe they have a whole new life out there that
already
waiting, and so they do literally want to just walk away and not touch anything else. They'll show up to sign the paper, but that's it.
Yeah.
And I've seen that many times, and that's really unfortunate, and it hurts both parties. It really does.
It really does.
You're not just hurting your ex partner, you are now hurting yourself. And that's what nobody wants to see that. I mean, that's just bad.
Yeah, not to mention, I always say very few people have imagination. It's hard for people to walk into a house that needs a lot of work and imagine what it could be.
Yes.
A lot of people need to see fresh paint. They need to see it looking good. Not everybody is a DIYer who can think, I can make this really spectacular with a little bit of elbow grease. So it could take longer for your house might sit on the market longer if you don't do some of the basics like fresh paint and other things
like carpet. Yeah. I mean, that's the most. People will say, well, we're going to give you a $5,000 carpet allowance on those purchases. So you're buying it. We'll go back to that $300,000. You're buying it for $300,000. We're going to give you an allowance of $5,000 to put new carpet in because you can obviously see this is trashed carpet in the house. Well, like you said, as a realtor, I recommend you go ahead and put that new carpet in.
Absolutely.
Because it's so much more difficult for someone to come in and they smell the cat.
Right.
It's just nasty.
It's a turnoff.
It's a turnoff, absolutely. And then that's going to mean that your home sits on the market longer. And the whole time you're still paying your mortgage and your insurance and taxes. All that still costs to you as long as your house sits, if it's sitting empty or if you're in it, either way.
Yeah, and your assets are tied up. Go ahead and put the carpet in or put the paint on the walls. Whatever the things are that you can do. And I always recommend do the simple things, of course. Do those. I understand if the roof doesn't, unless it's just visually terrible and then might turn somebody off from the house as soon as they pull in the driveway. But unless it's visually terrible, then you can put that off to closing, to do the roof, where you actually get some money so that you can actually pay the roofer to do that and you don't have to front that money. But if it's something very visual that's going to make people struggle with even envisioning themselves living in that house, then yes, it really needs to be handled before showing the house. Yeah, this is truly one instance where you have to put your emotions aside. They may not want to lift a finger because they're angry at that spouse and they want to make it as hard as possible on them. This is one instance where you have to look at it as a business transaction. This is a business transaction. Then in the end, if you handle it properly, you're going to have the asset that you need to sell at what you need it to sell for and walk away with hopefully some cash in your hand to go on and start creating a new life.
Yes.
You just have to put aside your animosities and, maybe you do need to get in there together and paint some walls. It's put it to the side, treat it as a business transaction because your future really does depend on you getting the most as you can for that asset.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, most of the clients that I've worked with that are in divorce, they work together enough to make sure the house brings the highest value.
Yeah.
And that's the more common thing that I see, and hopefully most of your listeners are in that position, but I know that there are plenty who do not. So it's just, that's good advice that you've given.
So do you see instances where people will decide to keep the house and use it as a passive income? Like
a rental?
Right, yes.
I have not seen that. It certainly is an option. I mean, especially if there are challenges for selling your house, and you can rent it and make it into a passive income. Because you're still going to be in partnership with each other, then if that's the case, unless one of you buys the other out,
right,
then you're still going to be in partnership with each other in a business at that point. And you're still going to have to work with each other when the roof needs repairs, when the plumbing needs to be worked on, if it's a rental. And you can have a property management company, and I recommend that for folks, unless you're just wanting to manage your own rental property, which I do manage our rental properties for the most part. But I also have rental properties that are managed by a property management company. So I experience both of those worlds. And a property management company can take a lot of the headaches away from you, but it comes at a cost. You're still going to be paying, not only are you paying the property management company, but generally the repairs and the fixes that they bring to you they're just a little pricier, I think, than what I would go out and shop and get myself. That may be just because I'm a good shopper for that kind of thing, but you're going to sometimes look at a job that they say this needs to be handled and it's going to cost you $1,000, and you're thinking, well, I could get that done for $600 or $700. Well, that's not your option at this point. You need to get it done and let them handle it.
I would think that particular option would only be beneficial if you're in a down market.
Correct.
If you go back to the 2008, 2009 housing crash, if you will, and you're not going to be able to sell it for a number of years and get a good price out of it, you might want to go ahead and consider that option until the market improves.
Agreed.
That would be a good scenario to think about. But.
Yeah, if the market is tough and you can't sell it appropriately and it's going to come back around, then you're exactly right. Rental might be what you do for a few years. Right. But again, I think you should, because you're going to end up being business partners with your ex-spouse, then you're going to need to have some business agreements in place. And there are costs to that as well. I mean, if you're going to turn in a partnership tax return, I mean, you've got to have a CPA fill that out. And I mean, I have business partners on real estate now, and we fill out, we have LLCs that we've set up, and the IRS looks at them as partnerships. So that requires a whole nother tax return for the partnership.
That's a good point.
And that costs money. So it all costs money. So I've got to pay a CPA to prepare that partnership tax return, and that one goes off, and then it adds a lot of complexity. So it would be an unusual situation, I think, where you would really want with your ex to be having that
still
business.
In partnership.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you have other business dealings with your ex, and maybe you're friendly enough that that's all going to be good. So yeah, I get that. I mean, it does happen all the time. We know that it does happen where there are businesses that you're both involved in, and you need to continue being involved in those. You've just got to work through that. I know that's much easier said than done. I'm thankful I'm not dealing with that.
Okay. We'll just keep that out there as a worst case scenario. You might want to consider that, or if, as you said, if there are other businesses.
Yeah.
So which option is the fastest and the cleanest?
Fastest and cleanest that's a great question. I mean, I guess if one of you can buy out the other, if you're in a position to do that, and we just talked about all the ways that could be done, if one of you's in a position to do that, I think that would be the easiest and the cleanest. Aside from that, of course, selling would be that would absolutely be the final. There's not even a chance that you left something at the house that you've got to come get, because you've sold it. Everything's gone. You've got to move everything out. I could see how if one of you has the house, the other might have some possessions, or maybe they're not possessions, but they're something you think are your possessions, or you feel like, and that could create some problem down the road. Maybe I don't know. Hopefully, you would agree to all that and handle that. But anyway,
at the divorce.
At the divorce, yeah.
So if I decide to keep the house, oftentimes people don't think about some of the, I hate to call them incidental expenses because they're not incidental, but what are some of the big things I should be thinking about if I'm deciding to keep the house? Absolutely.
I know, Lisa, you have a very good story actually about your mowing. And the lawnmowers.
Right.
And I mean, those are things you just would never think about unless you were the person who mowed the lawn all the time.
Right. And that, that was one of my big surprises. Everybody knows about, insurance and property taxes and the gas and light bill and the water bill. But you don't think about the yard work, which in my case, my spouse took care of the outside and I took care of the inside. And when I wasn't left with a mower, I wasn't left with any yard equipment whatsoever. I had to go out and buy a mower because when I got estimates to do my yard, it was going to be $150 every time they came out.
Yeah.
And then you have to think about, weed eating equipment and a blower. And I still don't have a blower. I haven't bought one of those yet. And trimming bushes and how are you going to get all of that done if you can't afford to pay somebody? And then you also need to think about a maintenance fund. I say fund now because, as I mentioned earlier, the first thing that happened when I decided to keep my house and refinance, or didn't refinance, I qualified to assume my loan. My dishwasher went out. Some faucets went out. I had to have a plumber. I had to have an appliance repair person. My fireplace just wouldn't light. It's just like you have all these things that you don't think about, but my house was built in 1980, so everything wore out at the same time.
Yeah.
So those are just things you need to be prepared. If you get too close to the bone, how are you going to keep operating the house?
That's a very good point. How are you going to keep it going? There are unexpected expenses, unless you've been the one that's been making sure they're all getting paid. Right. They may not be so unexpected. In my home, I keep the checkbook for the most part, and I have found that to be common, that one spouse keeps the checkbook, and really, so that person and pays the bills. So that person knows the expenses, but the other person doesn't. And that's a real challenge. You're exactly right.
Yeah, it's very common in boomer marriages for the husband to keep the checkbook.
Okay.
And in my case, I kept it, so I was fully aware of our month to month and had a very good budget. That's one thing I would recommend is I sat down and I went through all of the credit card statements and all of the bank statements for at least 6 months. And I documented all of the recurring expenses and I developed a budget. So I had a really good idea of what I was facing going into it. And if I could pay for it on the income that I was going to have after the divorce.
Okay.
So just be very strategic about, is this going to stretch me so much that it creates an undue amount of stress? What's my lifestyle going to be afterwards?
That's right.
Am I going to still be able to afford to go to the movies or go on a vacation, or is it going to take everything I have to keep the house going? So think about, what kind of lifestyle do you want to live after your divorce?
Yeah, and another thing, you mentioned, Lisa, that you ran into some issues with your dishwasher and appliances. You can purchase a home warranty, and anyone can buy a home warranty, and that's usually going to be, a decent one is going to be close to $500 a month. And I say a decent one, meaning, I mean, there are ones that are less than that each month. They may be $300 or $400 a month. Or I'm sorry, a year. I said a month. It's per year. So usually you can make the payments monthly. They might be $40, $50 monthly payments. They might be, more than that. But annually, if you're paying around $500 a month, a year, then you're probably going to have a decent home warranty that will help cover those repairs. What's good about the home warranty for someone who hasn't dealt at all with repairs and having to get a plumber and all those things is the home warranty company will go get those people for you.
That is such an excellent point, and I'm glad that you clarified that it's an annual fee, because the other challenge is, if you're not the one who's been arranging for home repairs, you have no idea who to turn to when something happens.
Right.
And so you're kind of at the mercy of trying to get recommendations from family or friends, or in my case, I went out, there's a Chattanooga Women's Supper Club group. I went out to that group of women, and they had very good recommendations. But you run the risk of being taken advantage of as a woman, because some of the repair people coming know you don't know the difference. And so, think about that. A home warranty is an excellent idea.
Yeah, and it's, as I mentioned, they will be the ones who send the contractor to you, and they're the ones who are going to pay the contractor. You normally will have I forget what it's called, but it's a portion that you have to pay. It might be $75. I have a home warranty right now, and it's $125.
Okay.
Service fee, that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Service fee. So if I have someone come to the house, in my case, I actually pay the home warranty company the service fee, but it may be that you pay the contractor. But either way, the service fee is a fixed amount that you know you're going to pay.
You can put in your budget.
You can put it in your budget, and then the rest of it is on them. They figure it out. They may have to come back with parts, whatever that is. It's on them. So that's a good thing.
I like that. I think I'm going to have to go out and buy a home warranty now.
Well, we've got some good a realtor can recommend some good home warranty companies to you.
Good.
So I can give you some advice there.
Well, great. So, gosh, we've talked about a lot to do. There's probably a lot more that we haven't covered. It's such a heavy topic.
It is.
I have to ask you, in your years of working with people, is there a person whose story particularly moved you?
Yeah, there is one, and it kind of fits. I mean, your story moved me when you told me about your divorce, but also in a similar vein, and this again, with me being a man and a husband, I realized the experience would be very different for a woman, a wife in that case. And this was a lady one of my clients she came to me to buy a house after her divorce, but it was pretty quickly. I mean, her divorce was actually in progress or finishing up, and she didn't know so many things that she needed to know that I guess I would have assumed she might have known. She and her husband had owned 2 different houses. They had bought one, and then they sold that one, and then bought another. She didn't know anything about it. She didn't know anything about the process because he had handled everything. So all she knew was she went and looked at houses, said, I like this one. Didn't have to think about the price, didn't have to think about anything. Wow. He told her what they could do, and she just had to show up and sign papers. And she had good income, very good income. She was a good earner of wages. And it was just, it was like we were working with a new homeowner, a new first-time home buyer, really. I was working with someone who had never, even though she had owned 2 houses, she didn't really know anything about it. We had to set her up with, a loan officer and get her set up there. And it really struck me how different her experience was than mine in house buying, I guess. And not just that because I'm a realtor, but I mean, if even just as a husband and wife in that case, how her husband had taken care of so many things. And the other, when your spouse is handling so many things that you don't know about, in this case, it was really challenging for her. And it wasn't a full-on first-time home buyer because if you actually have a lot of options or a lot of benefits as a first-time home buyer. There are down payment assistance programs. Yes. There are some fixed rate interest programs, some really good things for first-time home buyers, but you don't get to use those if you've owned a home in the past 3 years. So that it takes 3 years to get a reset. So if someone's listening right now, they're living in an apartment, if they are done with their house, well, that starts that clock where you will be a new first-time home buyer 3 years after the final mortgage or your name was taken off the deed, whatever that may be.
Well, I know Tennessee has a great first-time home buyers program. My daughter went through it. Yeah. And, look in your state. Just Google the first-time home buyers program for state of, and a lot of them have those.
That's right. And any lender, or I shouldn't say any, but most lenders, most mortgage loan officers are going to know what those programs are, and they've done a number of loans with them, good. And they can help guide you through them.
Okay.
Yes.
So you mentioned, that was her first time dealing with a realtor. How do you find a good realtor?
Oh, great question. Well, I think a lot of times a referral is good from a trusted friend. Certainly you can go online and look for realtors. You do also have the option of looking at your local realtors association. Wherever you live, at least in the United States, there is a realtors association that covers your territory. In Chattanooga, we have the Chattanooga Realtors Association. You can look up members there, and you can, you won't get reviews there. You can get reviews on Google and things like that. But I would recommend that you talk to trusted friends, perhaps the trusted professionals that we were talking about as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, your attorney might have some advice, but trusted friends who maybe, certainly if they've gone through something like this before, they may have had a good experience or a bad experience, whatever, and they can tell you that. And that's what I would normally recommend, is trusted friends who can recommend someone.
Okay, good old word of mouth.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and we're not, when I say recommend someone, it's best not to be just recommending your cousin or your friend. You got to watch out for that.
Yeah.
You do want to know that this person has had
someone
experience.
They've had experience
yes,
with.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I should clarify. Yeah, you definitely want that referral to include someone who's either they've actually sold their house using this realtor, or they bought a house using that realtor, or they just can look at that realtor and see the experience level they've had. Yeah. I would ask your realtor, how many houses have you sold in this kind of situation? Or even if not how many, but tell me about how a situation similar to mine that maybe you've worked through. I think that's the best.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a better question, actually, now that I think about it. More than how many you've sold. They may have sold 1 million condominiums, and you don't have a condominium.
Right, exactly.
So, you want to know what is a situation similar to mine that you've had experience with. Tell me about it.
Is it helpful if you have an area you want to live in to work with somebody who has a lot of experience selling houses in that area? Like you want to live, for example, in a certain city.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And you will not want to have a realtor that doesn't, I don't want to say not live in the area, because they may not live in the area, but they need to have a lot of experience in that area. Mm-hmm. So in our case, Chattanooga, Tennessee, yes, you either would want a realtor who is active. You want them to be active in this community. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean selling and buying real estate in this community.
So they're very familiar with the neighborhoods.
Yes.
They can tell you a little bit about the neighborhoods as well.
That's right. And they should have a general idea, like of the value of your home. Mm-hmm. Just when you're talking about what part of town, what neighborhood, that should be able to give them a trigger to at least have a range of idea of what your property value is, what your home value is. Mm-hmm. And that's only going to happen if they are actively working in that local area.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go get personal here.
Okay.
What book's on your bedside table?
Oh, well, Lisa, I would absolutely first say the Bible.
Yes.
The Holy Bible. I do try to read the Bible regularly. I wish I could say daily. I don't. Some days I miss. But I also follow a reading plan, and with the Bible, and follow through. Mm-hmm. I've read it the entire Bible a number of times. But I will also mention that the first time I started one of these, read the Bible through in a year.
Yeah.
It took me 8 years. I got through it. But
I
it was
just finished the Bible in 365 days.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah.
And I'm on my second round because, so I want to do it one more time because there's so much to absorb.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Bible is, great for inspiration, great for certainly for guidance in all parts of life. So that is absolutely what is. I don't actually read in bed, but I do have that handy. Yeah. Another book. I brought this one because I knew you wanted something other than the Bible that you were looking for. This one is called The Daily Climb, and it's by Matt Hullander, and he is a fellow Chattanoogan. Actually, Matt Hullander. And he is a very successful businessman. He's written this book. It's called The Daily Climb, 10 Principles to Change Your Life. And I just finished reading it recently, and it really it inspired me to do several things, including starting a partnership with another person that contacted me not that long ago. So, so if I hadn't read The Daily Climb, I probably would not have been open to a particular opportunity that arose.
That's a great testimonial.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is.
I need to tell Matt that.
Because a lot of books will say it will change your life, but you have a testimonial that it did.
Actually did. Yeah, I'm actually now in an arrangement, a business arrangement that I would not have been in had I not read this book.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about that?
That's fantastic. Matt will be glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, so who is inspiring you today?
Oh, my goodness. Who is inspiring me today? Well, Matt obviously did, because Matt Hollander did.
Yeah.
I'm inspired by many people. I have friends in a small group at church, and I want to say collectively that I'm inspired by them. And they, we kind of walk through life together and experience the things together. And if someone's listening and, I don't want to say, this particular person that you will never meet is who you should go be inspired by. No, you can be inspired by all the people around you, and certainly those that you get to have intimate, long-term relationships with. So developing close relationships with just a handful of people that you can walk through life together. That's what inspires me the most.
I love that. You can be inspired by many people around you every day.
You can be. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you inspire me. You're running this. You've been running this podcast, and I have a podcast. So
that's right.
I've been inspired by yours, Lisa.
Well, yeah. I've been inspired by your going live and doing video and all of that.
Well, we got to get you live then.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you joining me today.
It's been my pleasure.
It is. It's wonderful. I want to make sure we share how our listeners can get in touch with you, your social media, your website.
Sure. My website, my name is Blake Watson, and you can find me certainly with searches online, but my website is called athomechattanooga.com. And I also have a website for my podcast, and the podcast is called Let's Talk Chattanooga Real Estate. The website is ChattanoogaRealEstatePodcast.com. Okay. There's those, and then I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find me on Instagram as well. Now, I have a different name on Instagram. It is Rock and Roll Blake.
All right. What's the story with Rock and Roll Blake?
So of course, I love rock and roll, rock music. I was a DJ many years ago, radio disc jockey, and I worked at a number of stations in Chattanooga, Atlanta, Columbus, Georgia, Knoxville, Tennessee. They were all rock stations.
Okay.
What is now classic rock?
Yeah.
I was playing those songs when they were coming out. So
Current
they were
rock.
Yeah, they were new rock to me. I've never worked at an oldies station, but the music that I used to play is now classic rock.
Oldies.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Well, I will make sure to put in the show notes all of the information and how to reach Blake, so
thank you.
Our listeners can easily find you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa.
And thank you. Please join me on the next episode of the Silver Divorce Podcast. I also ask you to do me a favor and please follow this show and share it with people you know who are going through divorce. I'd love to hear from you at silverdivorcepodcast@gmail.com. This podcast is brought to you by our title sponsor, the Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, and show sponsor, Medicare Misty. Center for Sports Medicine and Orthopedics is the area's leading provider of multi-specialty orthopedic care. Using innovative surgical techniques and technologies, our team of specialists deliver exceptional results backed by exceptional patient care. Learn more at sportmed.com. Medicare Misty is a real person who can help answer your Medicare questions. Get real help from her team at medicaremisty.com. Whether you are considering divorce or maybe you're newly in the divorce process, we'll help you on your journey and tell you things your attorney might not tell you. Until next time, remember, divorce, it's just one event. It does not define who you are. I'm Lisa, and I'll see you next time.